Chantel said lovely nails.
Thank you, Chantel.
I have little manatees on my fingers.
Mine have dirt underneath because I work with my hands like a man. Do you ever feel like as a man, less stuff on you should be pink?
I've never thought that.
Girls are kind of gay about guys, let's be real. You ever think that sometimes what women find attractive in men is kind of gay?
To you, yes. Valerie, are you saying yeah to Will?
In general, I kind of feel like the straightest thing would be like two guys getting together. Kind of Sparta style.
Welcome to another episode of Unresolved Textual Tension, where I am accompanied by co-hosts.
I am ruggedly handsome, and my name is Will. And also with me is...
Maria! I'm here too, guys.
And Katie, what story are we doing today?
We are doing Princess Florinda and the 40-foot... What was it again? 40
Flight.
Yeah, thank
40
you.
Flight Tower by Tamsyn Muir of Gideon the Ninth Locked Tomb fame. And this is a story that was really interesting because it's really more of a short story than it is like a full-length novel.
Which is known as a novella.
Cultural appropriation. Cultural
That's
appropriation.
Known as a novella,
No.
as a term.
Cultural appropriation from Spanish. I don't accept it.
This one's actually pretty wild because it's got so many problems that I love. They are delectable. And even the things, there's a lot of our readers. That doesn't sound right. A lot of our patrons, there we go. A lot of our patrons felt the same way I did, including, I'm sure, Maria as well. But despite that, or maybe I should say, because of it also, I think it comes together in a rather fun, quirky, strange little children's tale.
I think that I sit between Maria and Katie on this in that I really enjoyed it, but I think the ending kind of undoes.
I knew you were going to say it. What did I say yesterday? What did I say?
Yeah, the ending just doesn't quite hit right, and I feel like it kind of punts on the whole idea, but overall I really liked it. And then farther on the spectrum, we have Maria.
I need to explain, first off, that I don't think
Jesus.
this is a bad book, and I actually think for what it's trying to do, it's doing a good job. I think within the realm of what this book is trying to accomplish, it is accomplishing its goals well, outside of the ending, which I think even the people who did enjoy it can agree. I don't know why. And I apologize to all of our patrons who I adore, who really enjoyed this. I don't know why, but I didn't enjoy this book. I just didn't. And so I'm mainly on here because I was talking to Will, and one of the fundamental problem for me is I just don't think this book is for me in the way that the kind of things I would want out of this story. Now, would I read this to kids? Absolutely. This would be such a good bedtime story, like a couple chapters at a time, building to it. I think kids would have an absolute flippin' ball with it. And I'm not saying that in the sense that this is only for kids, but just I think I could get so much enjoyment out of their reactions to this. But for me, I just, like, it's such a good concept, and I wanted, like, emotional stakes. I wanted any stakes. I just wanted a hint of stakes, and there's none. There are no stakes to be had. It's like, and it's not trying to be that. It is a cozy, I almost want to say it could be a comfort read for some people, where it's just kind of cozy, and it's got a good scope. Like, it does the thing. You have a princess locked in the tower. No one's coming to get her. She's got to get herself out. Floor by floor, baby. And so it's got a tight scope. It's got a small cast of characters. It's got a fun, quirky narrative structure as far as... So I made the point to Katie and Will that the narrative voice, not the audiobook narrator, who is the same, but the narrative style, the way... Tamsyn Muir writes as if there is a narrator floating above, judging the main characters hard and talking to you, the reader, because there are times where the narration talks to you, the reader, and it's almost the exact same narration as the Locked Tomb series. For me, it works. I've finally come together on this. It works better there because that story has so much emotional, legit stakes and is actually quite dark that having this comedic distant narrator can help like give you enough distance. It affects the internality of the characters a bit in that book, which is something Will has spoken about, but I think it works really well there. Where here, like, the story itself was also like it never felt like high stakey and intense, and it is, what's happening is high stakes, but you never feel it as a reader, so I felt like that was a disservice. Was it funny and witty? Yes. Were the characters like funny in their interactions together? Yes. I don't know why I wanted a different book. I wanted a different book out of this, and so
So the thing about it is that basically she didn't want her criticisms to be repetitive in the way that
yes.
mine for Guards was, where like I just kept having the same problem, which is that like, and then that gets kind of boring. I think this one, if Maria does decide to hang out with us longer, is going to be a little different because the synopsis is actually going to be kind of short, and then we can just talk about it in terms of issue by issue or whatever. I will say that a lot of those things worked really well for me, but I also could see how they don't. So like the more distanced tone, I actually liked better here than in the Locked Tomb. In the Locked Tomb,
I did too.
I think it leads to a certain amount of hollowness, whereas in this one I felt more like, oh, okay, this is a fairy tale, it's supposed to be distant, we're not supposed to be too. And then the sort of hints of darkness throughout I really liked. And I don't know, I think the characters worked a little bit better for me than they did for Maria. Part of it I wonder is how much of it is just that the voice actress is just sparkling joy.
She's amazing. She's incredible.
She is, but I really like what Valerie is saying here, which is something that I really agree with, which is that I keep coming back to calling it a stage play, which is I fully agree with. It really does feel like a stage play. And with that in mind, when I came into reading it, I don't know. I didn't have any expectations because I literally actually didn't know who it was by, and I didn't read a summary, and I didn't do anything to prepare myself for it. So when I was listening to it, I thought to myself, oh, this is very similar to the narrator who does Ianthe when Florinda's speaking. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it's the same narrator. And so I was just listening, and there wasn't, again, like I was saying before, there wasn't like an expectation set, but for some reason I went in from the get-go, I guess maybe the first 2 pages equivalent, thinking, oh, this is not a children's story, but it is a children's story. And this is not a stage play, but it is a stage play. And the distance tone Maria is talking about, the nature of the fairy tale, but twisting on its head, kind of like the Hogfather. And if you watched the Christmas movie with us, you'd know what I'm talking about. The Hogfather, obviously, significantly better. But like, as far as like, there are emotional stakes, like there's some pretty really cool stuff there. Everything feels really sewn together perfectly, while this doesn't. But in that same regard, it's got this kind of like nice imperfection to it that only that in addition to the narrative tone lends credence to a really delightful, like delectable thing. And I liked it so much that I bought a copy of the book, and I intend to thrust it upon any child in my presence, but also if I ever have a child, that will be read to them multiple times until finally they understand all the vocabulary.
And the thing is, I think that's really fair, but I think the thing for me is, because you both said, for a fairy tale style, but the thing is, this is how fairy tales are written. They're written very distant, with little emotional stakes, and so for me, when I want a fairy tale retelling, and I think this is the core of it. This is the core of it. When I want a fairy tale retelling, I want to be closer to the characters and experience the emotional stakes that the original fairy tales do not give you. There are not a lot of emotional stakes. When fairy tales do manage to slap you in the face a little bit, it is sometimes just with the sheer grossness of what is happening. Like when you get to the cellar in Bluebeard and you're like, oh, that's what's here. And you're horrified by the act itself rather than like what's happening to the characters. And so for me, and I think that's why like Uprooted works way better for me as a thing that is engaging with fairy tale tropes, because it does have an emotional core and it is building a lot of emotional and just stakes and tension. And I think that's just it. I think this is engaging with fairy tales within the normal scope of how a fairy tale is told, but turning those tropes on its head, which is super valid. Like, we don't have a princess walking away as a princess at the end of this. We don't So she is playing with some of the tropes there, but she's retelling it in a way where I think it number one, feels very similar to, like, that aloof narrator who's judging everything, but the emotional distance of an actual fairy tale. And so I think that's another reason why, for me, it's just not what I want out of a fairy tale retelling or something that is engaging in the tropes.
I did feel like the book, a lot of people in the final thoughts on our Discord were talking about like what they thought the deeper meaning was, and I don't actually think there is that much of a deeper meaning on it. I think that it's very clever, but I don't know that there's a lot underneath it in terms of, again, I think part of it is the problem is that the end of the story doesn't quite make a thematic capstone. But we should describe very quickly what the story is, because people complain that we don't do that.
Yes.
By people, I mean one person in our comments.
Basic premise. This story is about a princess named Florinda who is captured by a witch and put in a tower. And the witch is like, "Congratulations, miss. You're going to be stuck here, but don't worry, a prince will come rescue you soon." There's 40 flights. Each flight has a different thing. The first floor is a diamond-encrusted dragons. Asterisks, real diamonds. And you just sit tight. You got some milk. You got some bread. Someone's coming to get you. And no one comes to get Florinda. She ends up capturing a fairy and has to make her own way down, floor by floor, growing past princesshood into something else.
Accompanied by a psychopathic little fairy who very much does not love her. And the funny thing is, in our live stream, one of the questions was from Chantel was like, what book would we like to see become a video game? And this felt very video gamey to me at times, in that there's different distinct levels. There's a sidekick. There's even crafting in the game after you defeat certain
I would
enemies.
enjoy this as a video game so much more.
Before we jump in even further, earlier you mentioned that some people we had a Discord and they'd watched The Hogfather with you and Maria, but how would they even access that Discord, Katie?
They would access. God, why is this a test every time for me?
How do you always stop? Come on, Katie, you know this.
You can access our Discord by joining our Patreon, where you'll get exclusive access to content, as well as
we don't have that much exclusive just Patreon content.
we just have Patreon. Anyway, please save me.
Well, there's 3 tiers, Katie. You know all of them, right?
What are the 3 tiers, Katie?
There's the parasocial darling tier,
which is the highest.
And what would we even get at that tier, Katie? Because it's the highest. What would people get if they join?
The critique streams.
What are those?
This is giving me hard HSPT season. What are your strategies?
I know. In our parasocial darling tier, you will have access to our critique streams, where Will and I look at a very enhanced shit, where we magnify.
What are you doing? Okay, all right, okay. Let's just say it's worth it. Katie, what's in the second tier? The one right below it.
No, okay, I'm putting her out of her misery. We have 3 tiers. We have the general patron tier, where you get access to our Discord. We're there sometimes, mainly Will. Katie and I pop in on occasion. In our second tier, we have the book club members, where you can join our book club, where you can do fun live streams like this with us twice a month. The first one is our mid-month one, where Will picks a book. This is one of our mid-month ones that we all read together and get to talk about. And then at the end of the month, you get to do the book club picked one, where you get to nominate and vote on the books we do. So you have active power in picking one book we read a month, which is 12 books a year as far as our content goes.
1/4 of our content is held hostage to your whims. Are we not bountiful?
We are the most magnanimous of hosts. And then last is the Parasocial Darlings tier, where you get everything we just mentioned, plus you get the critique streams, as Katie was saying, where Katie and William look at a text, but on the micro level, looking at how descriptions are working, how language and
Prose.
grammar and prose is working on a small level to do specific things within the scene. And they'll often look at something specific, like sex scenes. What makes them work? What makes them not work? Banter and stuff like that. So it is very constructive. I mean, all of our stuff, a lot of people say is good for if you're a writer, but I would say those in general are a really fantastic tool if you're looking to get your prose a little beefy. And that's it. Those are our tiers.
Okay, good job, Katie.
I did better than last time.
You did. You did do better than
I
last
got one
time.
level down.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm just like Florinda. I gotta make I don't have a lot of thoughts in the head, and I need a little help to get from one floor to the next.
You know, Valerie actually had, I think, a point that seems like a joke, but is actually really poignant for this book, which is that the thesis is unhinged lesbians. And I actually kind of agree in that is kind of why you come to this story, and you shouldn't necessarily expect a lot more than that from it. Like, if you're not here for the unhinged lesbians, then it's like, it's not quite gonna add up to a lot more.
Sorry, I'm just gonna read. Valerie said this job interview is going well about Katie, and then Angry Otter goes, or a group presentation where the speaker got high.
That's so true. That's really
I'm
funny.
sorry, everyone. I'm just so sorry.
This story starts again with Florinda being captured by a witch and being put in the top of this tower. Now, the first thing to note is that the world in this is extremely soft in that it's really not clear what time period it is. There's really no hard world building at all. There is a concreteness to the things that they actually interact with, which is why I don't think this book feels floaty or weightless, because like they are dealing with like the corpses of monsters later on, and there is like they make a neurotoxin, and so there is kind of that, and there's a very specific set, but we don't necessarily know anything outside of it. And for me that works because again the tone is very distanced. It's very like, aren't we kind of like looking at this character in their terrarium, and it's interesting. But you said it didn't work quite as much, Maria, or do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so it didn't work for me because unfortunately, because it feels like there's very little stakes. So I am driven by character, like I have to bond to a character, or like the stakes in the story to keep me involved. Like, it kind of feels like, you know, when you watch a show and the dialogue's good, like the way it's written is good, but nothing is really happening that you're invested in.
Yeah.
And so it's just like the banter's good, but like why? That's what this felt like, where the narration and the distance and there is interesting because the book does come in and out of time a little bit, where it talks about how like nowadays people had access to like better information, and you get the idea that like this is also a stage at which people like newspapers or encyclopedias and potentially the internet, but it never like confirms. But it looks you, the narration looks you in the eye and is like, eh.
Okay, so I have an answer for this. I feel like this was Disenchantment before Disenchantment came along. Like, this is a very Disenchantment vibe, where it's, like, not an actual fantasy world, because there's, like, art stuff / modern things / not the genre things held within it.
Which Disenchantment? I don't remember there being not fantasy stuff. It was all very fantasy.
No,
like,
yeah, there were jokes every now and again that contained things that shouldn't have actually existed there.
Oh, the referential humor of it. Yeah.
It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of something Quentin Tarantino said, and it made me click with his style a lot more than I did beforehand, which is that in his films, you're watching a film, but within that box of knowing that this is not an entirely realistic, because most stories are trying to break your keep your suspension of disbelief. And it's a story, and so understand that something funny is going to happen, or you can play with the expectation of what a story is inside of that. And this kind of felt like that to me. Again, we're kind of looking at a terrarium where there isn't necessarily hard rules, and the author is telling you a story, but you're still kind of interested in the story, unless you're Maria, and then you're not.
Yes, because for me, I would argue that Tarantino works well because while you do have that bubble and you know it's not a movie, there are stakes, there are emotional stakes. I will even argue with Shrek, there was more stakes emotionally to Shrek. I cared more what happened to Shrek and Fiona and Donkey, and I got mad at Shrek when he, like, yelled at everyone and Fiona went off, and I'm like, Shrek, you gotta get your shit together, buddy. Like,
that's just a different level of emotionality, though. This one just doesn't have that, and I mean, personally, just for me, that doesn't bother me.
And that's what I'm saying is, and that's why, again, I'm just going to get very repetitive because this book isn't trying to have that level of emotionality. That's not what it's doing. It's trying to do this particular thing. It's trying to have that distance that you get out of a fairy tale. But for me, I need something to connect to, and it just...
You know that I'm also like that as well for the most part. So as a nice, like explanation, or I feel like comparison, there we go, that's the one I wanted, for a good comparison, I feel like if you can go back to a lot of the things I've discussed, especially to the people that I've done like help with, where I've given them feedback on their stuff, and a lot of the things I end up bringing up are, I can't connect with the character, blah blah blah, but simultaneously, if there, for me in this case, if there is a story that does the certain things in the right order that I like, or not certain things in the right, they press the right buttons, then, and they're doing it in a way that seems artful to me. I liked the comparison I gave Maria. I feel like, or was it Maria? Yeah, it was Maria. Like yesterday, which was, some people like, what's the word I'm looking for? The art. Abstract art. Some people like abstract art, and you know, there's like 4 lines in a blue circle and they're like, oh my god, masterpiece. Personally, that doesn't actually spell masterpiece to me. I say, oh, it's a circle and several lines. I guess that's cool. But this is that for me. This is the abstract art for me, where it's like, I like those 4 lines in that blue purple circle, whatever.
Part of what it made it work a little bit for me, and I thought was clever, is the next thing that happens in the story. See, we're tying the two together. Which is that when Florinda tries to start escaping, the floor she's on has a bunch of goblins on it. And they like attack her and she has to fight them. And she's not good at fighting. She mostly just runs away and they end up falling off because she trapped them or whatever. And like, there is a grittiness to how she deals with the goblins that is like really a little bit out of tone with the rest of it, but I really liked that, in that you're like, oh, okay, there's more going on to this story than just that. It's not exactly for kids. It's weirdly dark at times.
I didn't feel that. It never felt gritty. It just felt like bumbling into some good luck, and like she got like infected, but like there was never a moment where I was like, wow, that was a really high stakes scene. And some of the stuff that should have been very like, the later when she's actually like doing things and the stakes are higher, she's dealing with more intense things, are brushed over so quickly that grittiness is just lost. I do want to say, because I think this is great, Florinda doesn't try escape. She goes out to try
descend.
No.
The first part. The first part.
The first part, because
I know
she's decided she wants to bargain. Because the witch tells her, don't go out the door. There's a bunch of goblins out there. It'll go badly for you. And she's got in her room a never-ending loaf of white.
She's got the 2 loaves of bread.
Yes.
She's got wheat bread and white bread. And she thinks to herself, oh, I'll try to like barter with them with this loaf of bread. And she's like, oh, I best not be greedy. I'll give them the wheat one too. Or the white one too, in addition to the wheat. It's so dumb.
And she goes to barter because she thinks like it's a never-ending loaf of bread. That should be really good for them, you know? Because there's a group of them. And she goes out and there's one goblin and she throws the bread at him. He's uninterested. They tussle and then like he bites her. And then like hilarity ensues, and she ends up shoving a couple of goblins out the window through bumbling into some good luck.
She even dumbly, like, this should not work. It shouldn't, which is why I call it, like, it's really a comedy. Is that she at one point is like, huh? And so she takes the breadcrumbs later on when she retrieves more bread. So she gives the bread to the goblin. Goblin dies, but she loses the bread because the other goblins ran away with it. And so she goes back out to retrieve that bread because she's really effing hungry.
And she's also got a fever. She's sick. Goblin bites are infected.
Yes. And so she goes out to try to get that bread back. And She ends up getting it back, and in order to kill more goblins, she leaves a breadcrumb trail to the window, like it's a series of rats or ants. And the goblins come, and she just ends up pushing them over. It's so silly. It is not really all that. It's like, how could she get this much good luck? But it works just fine because it doesn't necessarily continue with that level of ease, but it does, which is where certain problems.
It never ceases.
No, it does. There are still scenes where she struggles and where she has to overcome certain things. But Maria's not wrong in saying that it does gloss over a lot of it. But that's where the structure of the story comes into play for me, and how it works. Could she have done something that would have made it feel, probably to Maria and also me, where it would feel like more whole? Yes. But again, this doesn't bother me personally. But continue with the summary.
Angry Otter makes the point, fairy tale logic. It's fairy tale logic.
Yeah.
It just is. And you have to be okay with that. And again, when I want a fairy tale retelling, I would like to move away from the fairy tale logic and get a little bit deeper into it. And you're not, as Katie said, that it's not that whole thing. Angry Otter does make the point. Florinda was born to kill. She had it in her all along. And I also want to highlight Laura B's comment. This is a note from the actual narration. The wheat with the nutritious parts, like the angiosperm, yay for hilarious anachronisms. And I like those moments. I like the narrator, but it just for me, it didn't.
You didn't like the flavor.
It doesn't come together.
I think I'm realizing that one of the reasons I like this story is that I read it differently than other people, and I think that's one of the reasons the ending didn't work for me, is that I don't necessarily know that this was the author's intention. In that, for me, the stakes were more like, oh shit, Florinda's gonna do something bad at the end of this story. We'll talk about Cobweb in a minute, but I thought that was leading up to it. And so it wasn't necessarily, can she defeat these things or not? It's like, how is she's gonna change into something fucked up, and then that isn't really what happens. And so I think that's why it felt, because again, to me, those moments of violence and her reaction to them, I was like, oh wow, this is gonna go to a different place. And the other thing is, I think I liked Florinda at first more than you're supposed to. I feel like everyone else, and I think the book itself is kind of oh, she needed to change, and I was like, she's just like a normal person. It's kind of jokey about how dumb she is.
No, I wouldn't say that. Man, we all had such different reads on it, because that's not how I felt at all when I was reading it. It started off with the author the narrator is pointing fun at her and calling her out and her dumb idiosyncrasies that as a princess she would have. But I don't think while the narrator themselves point these things out, Florinda was never portrayed per se in a way that, in my opinion, made me think that she was she's unexperienced. And the narrator even literally goes into a little spiel about how Florinda wasn't necessarily dumb. She was just very inexperienced and was doing what princesses should have done. So there's that. But it also, Florinda was empathetic. She was trying to do what a good person should do. So I don't think that it was she should change. It was, unfortunately, it doesn't matter what she wants.
Oh, I think you misunderstood what Will was saying, because I don't think that's what he was saying. Is that the narration was saying she should change.
No, but the book itself.
Like the Prophet Muhammad, blessings be upon his name, you guys will never know the truth of my words.
Oh God, Jesus Christ, Will.
Blessings be upon his name as well. I think I was somewhere in between, in that I feel like the narrative, not necessarily the narrator, is saying something about how who she was at the beginning is not great or needed to change a little bit because of what happens at the end with the regenerate story and the fact that she does end up happily as the dragon. Let's go. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to say very quickly the plot, because I think the ending is just really important. In the tower during a storm gets caught a fairy called Cobweb. Cobweb is hilarious. She's totally different than Florinda. She's very callous and not a great person. She is also
originally sexless.
Yeah, I was gonna say, she is not a she. She is a neither he nor she. But because Florinda only really knows how to make dresses and smocks, she is a she.
Well, it's hilarious because she's like, okay, Cobweb, I gotta figure out if you're a man or not, because I've been getting naked a lot, and that would be terrible if you were a man. That's very much the style of the story. And Cobweb goes whichever one is better, I'll do it. And Florinda was like, well, there are upsides to both. but also secretly thinking like, no, there aren't. And I think that's part of the reason people think the story is about gender to an extent, because the story does have themes of that throughout. I don't know that it makes a cohesive argument, but anyway, and Cobweb is like, she broke her wings, so she's stuck with her for a month, and so she like grudgingly has to help Florinda try to get down the tower, and she keeps having to fight all these monsters, and like she's not good at it at first, and it's very funny. And then there's like they
training montage.
There's a training montage, and like Cobweb makes her like different weapons, like a spear with a neurotoxin at the end, and then like a coat out of a rat's pelt.
Yeah, there's what I think one thing that makes me really happy in this book is, like Maria briefly mentioned before, she has a flask of milk that is always cold and has a little fat on the top, a flask of cold water, 2 loaves of bread, and then she has an orange that constantly, like, you know, re-solidifies itself once you've eaten it. And it's even called out at one point where Cobweb's like, the magic that this witch has is ridiculous. I can't believe how great this is. Our union at the ferry should have magic more accessible to them like this, and stuff like that. So it's got that kind of like little like tongue-in-cheek like there's like politics in this world that don't really seem like it actually fits in with the narration style and what's actually going on. But what I was gonna say is that one of my favorite aspects of it is that over time, while these little things the witch left her to survive off of are helpful because it is what allows her to survive, simultaneously, slowly but surely, these things end up being things she hates so much, because the water is too cold when she has like wounds or something at one point or something like that. The orange is absolutely disgusting after she uses it for antibacterial stuff. And it's really funny, and I feel like it fits into the entire theme of like, what it should be is not going to be that way. Instead, it's going to be twisted and corrupted, and you're no longer going to like it, which is where Will said it felt like the ending was supposed to be like something a little different, which is where I feel like it was going to be darker, but it isn't right now.
This is the stuff with the food and the stuff in the with the different materials in the tower is, I think, maybe my favorite part of how it's a fairy tale, because it's like, okay, how do you feed the princess if she's in the tower? You get her regenerating, whatever, but maybe you didn't think to make it nutritious enough, so she needs vitamins, and so then they have to catch birds and eat it. And that I really liked, that kind of exploration of, okay, this is an absurd logic, but like, what would it actually mean and how would that play out? And that I really did like, and I really thought worked well.
So it's just that, like, I would have liked all of these things. I would have liked all of these things in a story where, like, you know, she actually gets bitter, and she actually reckons on her way down with the changes in herself, or there is actual moments, like, I like the idea of her having to kill the birds and eat them, and then having a reaction to it. Like,
I know exactly what you wanted from this, but man, yes. I gotta say, I don't want that from this.
Cobweb helps her. Cobweb's wing eventually fixes itself, but Florinda traps her before that, and it's kind of like a weirdly dark moment. And then they keep fighting all the way to the bottom, and the whole time Florinda is becoming less and less a princess. Her tears used to heal Cobweb, because princess tears can do that, but now at the end there, she's not really a princess. She kind of likes it though, how she's become colder and she feels like a warrior. And so she gets to the bottom, and Cobweb leaves her because she loves Cobweb, but Cobweb doesn't really love her back
because she imprisoned her.
And then at the bottom she meets the witch who's coming back, and the witch is like, oh, that was weird.
She also kills the dragon, the diamond encrusted dragon, off fucking screen.
You know,
Jesus
I'm fine with it.
Fucking Christ.
I'm fine with it, but only because I have a certain preconceived notion in my head.
And then she's like, oh, wow, well, you're something different. What if next time I capture a princess, you're the dragon at the bottom? And Florinda's like, And Cobweb shows back up and is like, I'm her agent now. This is how much you have to pay her. And Florinda seems to be pretty chill with this whole interaction.
And Cobweb loves her now.
And then the next time there is a princess, she goes up to the princess, and the princess is all like how she was at the beginning of the story, and she hands her, I think, a silver sword?
The gold sword.
And is like, oh, I'll meet you at the bottom. Like,
I want a challenge.
No. Right. What happens is she says, oh, are you going to rescue me? And Florinda says, No. And then she gives her the sword. She's like, because I want an something, because I want an effing challenge. Because she learns the word effing, which she'd never heard before.
And the other thing is that Florinda at one point had become kind of like, oh, is my family going to accept me when I come back? Like, how's that going to work out? So, like, that was part of what she grew into accepting, is that, like, now she can be the dragon at the bottom, and this is who she is. Okay, so that's the plot overall. I did not love that as an ending. Partly because I had felt like the book was going to go somewhere darker, and like the whole moment of Florinda basically trapping Cobweb in the tower with her, I so liked that moment. I was like, okay,
It's
this
the
adds
best
a lot.
moment.
It's selfish, but it's also like she needs to survive, and like it's a little complicated in that way. And she starts to really like Cobweb, because Cobweb's so pretty. She keeps talking about it. And I know you guys wanted your unhinged lesbians, but I don't really think that whole thing makes a ton of sense. Like the two of them falling in love, it only really works because the narrative is distanced. Like it wouldn't really work if they had to like actually, if you weren't like, okay, this is fairy tale.
Justify why they'd like each other.
The fairy tale logic is kind of at work there. And so at the end, one of the things is right before she lets Cobweb go, she goes, you know, I love you, Cobweb. And, you know, loving someone is like hurting all the time, but not being something ache.
And Cobweb's like, it's indigestion. You don't love me.
But then she lets Cobweb go, and Cobweb runs off. And I thought that was going to be the point of the story to a certain extent, was like, oh, the enemy all along was the friends we made, but it's like the enemy all along wasn't the dragon, it was breaking up with somebody because you love them. But then Cobweb comes back, and also that really wouldn't have made sense thematically with what came before. And I think because what was coming up was like something kind of dark thematically, like maybe she keeps Cobweb with her this whole time, maybe she decides she's gonna trap someone in the tower now. Like just becoming warrior queen to me felt like too much of a happy ending because the other thing is at certain points she had like murdered people in there. She had become like it to me it felt like, felt to me like the author was saying like, oh, isn't it cool she has grown to be this person now through these hardships? And for me, I was like, no, it kind of sucks that she had to become, like, it would suck to have to murder all these things and get to the bottom.
But you know what? I don't, like, I'm sure, like, I'm not saying that's the incorrect way to read it, but that's just not, like, I just felt like it was not that it was the way she was supposed to be. It was a loss of innocence in a way that wasn't good. Like, she wasn't, like, I did not feel, well, I felt like, yeah, she was jaunty and everything at the end. She's like, I want an effing challenge. And, you know, like, she's kind of like, quote unquote, badass. There was also a certain lack of personality in them, which you might attribute to maybe a rush job or something. But I also attributed to, like, it's not a good thing that she's changed. I don't feel like it's a good thing. While it's, like, maniacal in a way, yeah, for sure. But it doesn't feel good. I felt like, especially the way certain things were worded at certain points, because I had to rewind them a couple of times, was when she killed or when she showed signs of intelligence in a way where she thought selfishly, or in a way that maybe not selfishly but thought like cunningly, that it was not necessarily a good thing. While it was a smart thing, it wasn't a good thing.
I feel like that doesn't quite, I understand what you're saying, and some people in the comments are saying it as well, but like to me, like she kind of gets what she wants in terms of like the stakes of the story.
And she's so happy at the end. Like there's no point where she reckons with what she's become, because I do agree. I think it is supposed to be read darker, but it just like and so for me, I disliked the ending less than William, because for me the ending just felt endemic it felt of a piece. Like it was as lacking in the emotionality of everything else before. So to the ending, why should Florinda be sad or have complex emotions about who she has become now when she had none prior? Like
exactly.
And but that's endemic of the problem I have.
I know.
And so and the other thing I would want to say is I didn't think of it as a romantic love. I think I might have said something that made it sound like because like the thing is it's not a romantic love. You can either look at it as like an ace or a romantic, or just two people that love each other as beings that Yeah, and it didn't work. I would have liked it better if Cobwood legitimately was like, you kept me imprisoned and I'm leaving now. You can't have everything.
I would have liked for her to just leave and not come back, and for it to end with Florinda on her own with the whole thing. But yeah, no, I read it as like an unhealthy love. It was not a healthy love. It was a very like selfish love. And I really would have preferred, that is one of the things on my bullet point list, is I would have preferred if Cobwood never came back. It's because it didn't seem in line. While you could argue there are certain things that Tamsyn Muir puts in towards the beginning where it's like, oh, Cobwood does this when she actually feels guilty or something. That's the closest we get to like, oh no, that's not true. Because Cobweb also uses her gray stuff, but then you could also, that explodes. Cobwood really likes the stuff she made while she was in the tower, and she's like, this is really cool, I want to use it, don't touch it, it's mine. And then she ends up using it to save Florinda. And you could either read that as, oh, that's like a sacrifice she made for Florinda because she likes her in some way, or you can just say, oh, if Florinda dies, I die too. So I don't think it's supposed to be read as like she loves, which is why the ending where she's like she also felt like what it feels like to be in love. It seems like a rush job at the end. Like I really feel like everything up until Cobweb going up the fireplace, because when she's released, she's like, I hope the dragon eats you, and then flies up the fireplace and goes away. I really felt like everything from that point on was like shoved in to finish on time for something, which is fine.
It does kind of feel like that, or it kind of feels like Muir didn't quite want to kill her darlings. Like she liked the ship, so she was going to keep it happy at the end, even though for the best part of the story. I think, yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes back to me too that I think the author thinks this is a happy ending, and I would have liked it more if it was like a broken ending.
Like she had actually gone home and her family hadn't recognized her, or she realized she had no place. She was restless. She had there was no fun. And you can even keep it in the tone where she just goes and she's just suddenly unfulfilled and she's kind of bored and she doesn't actually like the soft gloves and she did have to get them resized. And, she ate the chocolates for a while, but then she got tired of the chocolates. And then she ends up back at the tower, this place that she spent so long trying to escape from. And then the witch makes a deal with her and she realizes that because of what the witch did, she had to lose the relationship with everything she had with her friends and family and then come to this point. But that's not what happens.
That's what I wanted.
I like that idea, but I would not have, I would not have wanted her to go back home. I like your idea. I think that works really well for a story, but I don't like the idea of her ever leaving the tower. I want it to be contained.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but at the same time, it's like, the other thing is, I think part of the problem is that Florinda at the beginning, to me, doesn't feel like she's missing anything in life because she's just fine. She's like fine with who she is. And so her eventual change doesn't feel triumphant, like, oh, I had the murder in me all along, I think it's like Valerie said. To me, it just felt like, okay, I am now a different person because the author likes this kind of a person more than the other kind of a person. And that's kind of how it felt to me. Did you want to go over your bullet points though, Katie?
Yeah, thank you. Here, I rebring. Okay, readable. While I would have probably preferred more development at the end due to the dragon being such a key feature / Florinda's final evolution and how she handles it on her own / the pacing of the story, I think I personally would have struggled to decide how I wanted her to accomplish this, and there's a certain see behind the curtain by showing this that I personally think would have do you like how many personallys I put in? Personally think would have taken some magic out of the ending for me, which is true. Second bullet point. It doesn't make any sense that Florinda would work for the witch at the end as a princess, but it does make sense since she is a quote-unquote monster, which I thought was done. But, and the silliness still matches the rest of the book, so it's fine with me. All right, third bullet point. Biggest issue for me is Cobwood's decision to return, as we've already previously discussed, which really didn't seem like it made sense without something else to show how her mind is turning. But to be fair, the book did, and then I go into the idea of how she did, the book did establish that she gets more aggressive when she feels guilty, and her final words before she shoots up the fireplace would support that shift. But again, I have issues with the whole, like, I don't think it's actually love, so I don't like how at the end Cobwood was like, I feel that thing that you said is supposed to be love. I would have preferred, if she did even return, for her to be like, yo, so I want to make money or something like that. I don't want her to love her.
I want this life. I don't want to be a garden fairy, and I like making potions and working. I don't love you.
I too have changed.
Yes, I too have changed.
I would have preferred that. I don't like the dumb love thing. Next bullet point. I like the multiple definitions of love in this book. I think that's a really important feature, and that's one of my favorite parts of it. And then we already talked about this bullet point, how it's Stockholm syndrome. Somebody brought that up in our final thoughts thread. But I think that's whether or not it's on purpose, art from the artist, that's how I read it, and it did not feel like a good kind of love. And I thought perhaps her thesis would have been, not my thesis for the book, but her thesis was, being corrupted is okay sometimes because it can make you stronger and more self-sufficient.
See, I actually agree with that thesis. I agree that that's her thesis, but I don't love that thesis. To me, it's like,
I don't think it's a good one.
I know you like your butch tough lesbians, Muir, but like not everybody needs to be one, and the story sort of like frames it as though Florinda needs to be one. Not that I think Muir is whatever, but like I'm just speaking to like a slightly more interpreted version of the author. And also because of the nature of the work just being short. So Valerie says, sometimes trauma makes you a little evil in terms of some of the stuff we were talking about. And I think the thing about that is like, she's not evil at the end, though.
She doesn't feel evil. She just feels like she's good at killing monsters.
I mean, yes, Maria, not untrue, but she felt like, to me, a not better version of herself. And I like that.
Okay. I mean, I think, again, I think the framing of the novel doesn't quite support. It's interesting because one of the things I said to Maria, because we were talking about it this morning, is that, like, I feel like a lot of people have sort of incoherent thoughts, either positive or negative about the story.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I felt going in, is that, like, I really liked it and I really enjoyed it, but I didn't quite know how I felt about certain things. And, like, one of the cool things about discussion is you can kind of, like, pinpoint things. So, like, I think I've kind of come to understand it a little bit more. I feel like the conversation is wrapping up, but also it hasn't been that long. So do you guys want to say more stuff?
It's a short novel, so that's fine. But go ahead, Maria. It looked like you were about to say something.
For me, unfortunately, I just will be a broken tape. This is not what I wanted from the story or this premise, and it didn't do the things for me, and it didn't work. I think it works for other people, and I think on its own, within the realm of what it's trying to do outside of the ending, apparently, I think it's good, and I think, people will have a very good time with it. But it's just not my cup of tea.
I really like it for the imperfections it has. I like fully, like, again, everything Maria has brought up and everything Will has brought up, and a lot of the stuff, which I've read most of it now because I was so curious. This is like one of the only ones I've ever read people's final thoughts for, like, in their entirety.
No. We pay lots of attention to our patrons.
In their entirety. Sometimes I skip some paragraphs and stuff.
No. Katie always reads Le Patron's opinions on things. That's patrons in French.
All of that is 100% correct. But I really like the imperfections in this. It feels like this is a piece where she's not like a master of her craft, and she's still, there are things people find in other books of hers. I've only read the Locked Tomb series, but in that, where there's still flaws and stuff. I don't know. I just really I guess I really liked, and I told both Maria and Will, this is going to sound like an old hat. What my husband said that I really what I like is, art is a vibe, and I'm vibing with this piece. And that's how I feel about it.
I do think also there's something that, like, it's pretty harmless. This isn't Fourth Wing. Yeah. Everyone in the comments saying, like, I just liked it. And I think if you just like it because it's unhinged lesbians, that's cool. So actually, kind of an interesting question is, has this made us think about the Locked Tomb differently? Any kind of, like, connections between the two? One of the things Maria had said, and that's right, I'm putting you on blast, leaking the DMs, is that you were a little disappointed when you realized it was the same narrative style, and that makes the Locked Tomb feel a little less special. And I actually feel that almost with every author who, like, I read, and then I read one of their other works, and there's certain commonalities, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't that viewpoint. Martin just has a thing for nipples. Like that to me always is sort of like inherently cheapening of the world. But I actually thought, again, the more distance POV actually works better for this than it does for the Locked Tomb.
I think most people will have a good time with this. You know, they might have some problems with the ending, or you might be Katie. And I think there will be a minority that'll be the me's. So, you know.
No, don't forget, Maria, there's quite a few people that said exactly the same things that you, well, maybe not exactly the same, but, you know, similar things to what you said that were like, yeah, no, this isn't, same issue. When I was reading through those explanations, I was like, yeah, all of this is 100% correct, and you guys worded it way better than me, because I wasn't even thinking on that level. I was thinking, oh, I want a copy of this book so I can like pelt it at my child at one point.
It still seems like the majority of our patrons still enjoyed the experience, even if they can acknowledge the other stuff, versus me where I just didn't. Like it wasn't. I nearly this morning was like, maybe I'm just not gonna finish it, and I can't 100%, except that it just was like disappointment for me. Like, you know how when you talk about when you read something and you're just like, you're so into what it could have been, and in this case it's I don't think it was trying to be that thing. It's like when Will read Red Shirts, and he wanted it to be
yeah
that and it's just like
that's a great comparison.
It's exactly that. That's not what Red Shirts wanted to be. It wanted to do the thing it did, and it did the thing, and outside of, you know, make sure your characters speak differently from each other, like, for the most part, I thought the book itself did the thing it wanted to do.
That narrator, I'm Will Wheaton. God, he's ruined so many Star Trek and Star Trek adjacent properties.
What?
He's the most annoying character from any Star Trek TV series, and everyone agrees with that. It's not just me.
Again, I just think, so you'll fall somewhere on the spectrum. I think I am very far on the spectrum, so much so that I don't think I would be. I don't think there will be a lot of people who fall in my camp, and it's just because this isn't what I wanted out of this kind of story. And so wherever you fall on the spectrum, be it the Katies who can look at it and say, yes, but I loved it anyway, nom 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 nom, or the Wills who had fun but found issue with the ending,
or the Marias who can barely finish it.
I think there's a couple other stages between Will and the Marias. I think there's a few other places in between that, but there's only 3 of us, so that if you walk far to the other side, there's me. And again, I'm not saying this is a bad book. It was just not a good book for me and my tastes.
If you find that you often agree with Maria 99.9% of the time, this book probably is not for you. If you find that otherwise, go for it.
You know, it is interesting that Maria is the straightest of the 3 of us, and she disliked this book the most.
I think there's a secret like lesson behind
it.
Katie and I literally just did a rewrite of Sword Heart where we made 2 out of the 3 rewrites lesbian, and I love the Locked Tomb series a lot, a ton, one would say. And I have liked, and my favorite part of Priory of the Orange Tree was the cute lesbian romance that didn't get enough screen time.
Maria, you didn't even have to support any of this. It's all well known.
Just say lesbian moms.
Oh yeah, my moms are lesbians. That's the other part of it. But the thing is, you always have to think, if somebody just pops in and they only watch this video.
Fair enough. I
have to give the context, because other people know.
True.
And it's like when Will says dumb stuff and I'm like, he's just joking, don't worry. Like, you have to assume somebody's just gonna walk in and watch it.
But I'm actually glad you joined us, because I kind of thought we were all gonna just squee over the book, and I think it's more interesting that we disagreed. And again, I think it helped me get to understand why why it didn't quite work for me in certain ways.
Hey, Thea brings up a really good point, though. She agrees with Maria 99% of the time, but she currently disagrees with her take. So never mind.
We love you all, our parasocial darlings.
Bye.